Will people here ever forgive him? I know he did a bad thing trying to take over the world, but he saved a lot of people before that, right? Doesn't that count?
Yeah. Dad probably saved more lives than he took. But those lives don't just cancel out the others.
So he never gets to say he's sorry? He's a bad guy forever?
Man, it's crazy to think I've been doing this for 5 whole years. Anyways, recently I made a video about why we tend to hate certain types of characters, but on the other hand, we may like others even though what they might be doing is objectively worse in terms of actions, such as the general love for Omni-Man but the almost universal hate for Immortal and Duplicate and Amber while we're at it, since a lot of people mention that in the comments. Now this has been a topic I've thought about for a while, and I'd be lying if I said the popularity of that video didn't help push this video out sooner, but in terms of fictional media, when do we as audience finally accept a character redemption after they've done terrible actions? Because as much as it would be easy to say it's as cut and dry as, well, they said sorry and feel bad for what they did, I don't believe it's that simple. So buckle up because we're going to dive deeper into what I find to be such an interesting topic that must be looked at with a lot of nuance and subtlety. But instead you got the person whose profile picture looks like how kids used to draw their middle school bullies. So a lot of people when they hear about this type of topic tend to think of one thing, and that's the villain redemption stories. And yes, that will certainly take up most of the cases. I wanted to expand it more even outside of that. But first, while talking with a close friend of mine, we discussed about what are all the factors that people tend to think about, even if not directly, when they are ready to accept the redemption of a character who has done some horrible stuff. And while I didn't want to use this one character because he's in every single thumbnail and the poster child for redemption stories, like if he doesn't fit the criteria my friend and I came up with, but let's use the emo fire boy himself, Todoroki. No, of course I was referring to Zuko from Avatar: The Last Airbender. So using Zuko as the here's what we're looking for example essay, I can better explain the criteria I mentioned, with it being composed of 6 different parts, with the first part being backstory. The backstory of a character often plays a pivotal role in why characters are the way that they are. In the case of Zuko, and I'll keep this portion relatively brief, but key moments of his backstory include having his mom disappear from his life, dealing with a psychopathic younger sister who was a firebending prodigy who outclassed him constantly and because of it made him the top choice of being eliminated from the royal family until his mother sacrificed herself. And finally, after speaking out of turn with concern for the soldiers who would just be sent to die in a battle, his father challenged him to an Agni Kai, and even when Zuko refused to fight back, he had half his face burnt and then was promptly banished.
And suffering will be your teacher. I looked away.
And that's at least the important points that play a determining factor in his journey. This is a lot of traumatic experiences, especially with so many of them happening back to back and at such a young age. His banishment is what causes him to pursue the Avatar in hopes that he will be able to regain his honor and be welcomed back by his father with loving arms.
Like that's ever gonna happen.
Growing up in such a cruel environment explains a lot of the issues that Zuko deals with throughout the show. The next part of the redemption acceptance criteria is the actual action. What did the character do and how impactful is it within the context of the story? In the case of Zuko, arguably some of his worst actions are hunting Team Avatar, betraying Katara and Iroh to join Azula, stealing, and finally sending an assassin to kill the Avatar. Zuko has definitely done some pretty terrible things throughout the show, however, maybe it's me being desensitized to violence in shows and movies and video games, or even just seeing all the horrific shit that happens in the real world. But at least in terms of fiction, Zuko never did anything that most people would consider to be irredeemable, and I will talk about that later. That said, in my opinion, he at the very least at one point definitely did try to get Team Avatar killed with Sparky Boom Man.
I understood that reference.
And I don't think that should be completely ignored. The third part is intention. If a character is well written, they usually have an intention for every action they do, whether good or bad, and understanding that intention can help us understand why that particular person might be doing something horrific, and while it doesn't justify the action, it puts us in the character's mindset. In the case of Zuko, many of the terrible things he did were all in the pursuit of regaining his honor, returning back home, and being accepted by his father, hoping he'll finally get the love he always wanted.
Like that's ever gonna.
The fourth part is remorse/self-reflection, which is when the character character actually realizes what they did was wrong and actually feels guilt from it. This I feel like is pretty self-explanatory, so I won't go too much into this one. The fifth part is facing the consequences of their actions. In some shape or form, they need to face an appropriate amount of fire for their actions. In the case of Zuko, it's being feared by everyone outside the Fire Nation, even if he is still doing good. Granted, that's more of a reflection of his father, but he still did somewhat similar things in his hunt for Aang, and also even when he does attempt to rejoin Team Avatar, he is not welcomed immediately with open arms, which is understandable and deserved, even if he has been redeemed at this point, and the audience knows he has had a full change of heart. And the sixth and final part is righting their wrongs in a way to atone for their past actions, which for Zuko includes making amends with Iroh and helping Aang learn how to firebend in order to help him take down his father. And I do want to say that just because they are doing good, that doesn't cancel out all the bad things that person committed. Like, I saved one person, so that cancels out the one person that I killed. On the topic of flaming emo boys, I want to talk about one more character that in my opinion is a very well written character despite being a terrible person, and who never gets truly forgiven, and rightfully so, and is more focused on atonement, and that being Enji Todoroki, aka Endeavor. Now before I dive into this, do not mistake me talking about his character from a writing perspective in a positive light for thinking this is a good person, and that his actions should be downplayed, because they absolutely should not. Abusing children is among one of the worst things anyone could ever do, and whether it's fiction or in real life. These are terrible people, and I don't ever believe that they are truly to be forgiven for what they did, which is to take advantage in some shape or form of what I consider the most vulnerable within our society. And I think that's why Endeavor works as a fascinating character. Endeavor was a prideful, ambitious man that was solely focused on becoming the #1 hero to a point that it consumed everything he did, and despite everything, it still wasn't enough to surpass All Might. Accepting that he himself would never be able to accomplish this dream, he instead set up an arranged marriage just so he could get the perfect combination of fire and ice quirks that could balance each other out. He basically kept breeding to get the perfect child in terms of quirks, almost like how some big cat breeders that would try to breed for a special color of tiger, which is all inbreeding by the way and offers no actual conservation value, and then saddles these cubs with a huge amount of health problems, and if they don't get the perfect fur morph that they're looking for, often these non-desirable cubs are discarded, in often horrible ways. Which is what Endeavor did to all of his other children that didn't turn out the way he wanted, seeing them as failed products and not his own children. He became both verbally and physically abusive towards his children and his wife. It isn't until after he became the #1 hero that he begins to self-reflect as both the new #1 hero and how he treated his family. In an attempt to atone for his past actions, he tries to rebuild the bridges that he once burned, even knowing that his sons resent him for everything he did to them and their family as a whole. And despite the efforts he put in, he accepts that he can never fully repent of his mistakes, but he can atone for them and can help them recover as much as they can from his actions, and decides to separate himself from his family and chooses not to get involved back with them until they are ready. But this doesn't stop him from continuing to try and to be a better person overall. Even when it is revealed to him that Dobby is actually his son, who he thought was dead and has now become a villainous mass murderer, he's hit with the full weight of realizing how his abuse has poisoned not just his family but society, with the death of every single person at the hands of Dobby falling on him. And what does he do after this confrontation and his past is exposed to the public? He's transparent and strives to do better. He accepts that he won't be able to be forgiven for his mistakes, and he can't fully repent of his actions, but he will forever continue to atone for all his actions to make sure that he won't burden the next generation of heroes.
It's okay if you don't forgive me. Because I don't want forgiveness. I want to atone.
And I think that's why Endeavor is probably one of my favorite characters in My Hero Academia, because despite being one of the most despicable characters at the start of the series, he was able to be built up as an incredibly fascinating character. I think there are times in his journey that it would be easy for Endeavor to use certain events that happen as an excuse, such as, well, my family isn't going to truly forgive me, so why even continue to try and be better? It's why I think he's such a good example of a character atoning for his horrible past actions. It's also important to note that all this wasn't done within a single episode, or even a handful. This was built up over the course of several seasons, with each season building upon the next and not backtracking or getting repetitive. When a character is being redeemed but it's too rushed, then often one of the aspects I mentioned earlier is undermined, resulting in a poor redemption that can often be forced or feels like the character gets off too easy. With the first example that comes to mind on this topic is Abuela from Disney's 2021 Encanto. She is responsible for the generational trauma that her entire family experiences. Granted, she had a very traumatic backstory, which included getting run out of her home, witnessing her husband getting killed, and then having to raise triplets on her own. And while it wasn't malicious, but out of fear, that still doesn't change the effects that those actions had on her family. But I and many others online never felt like she got fully reprimanded. Like, Mirabel did appropriately chew her out.
Bruno left our family because you only saw the worst in him.
Bruno didn't care about this family.
He loves this family. I love this family. We all love this family. You're the one that doesn't care. You're the one breaking our home.
Don't you
The
ever...
miracle is dying because of you.
But honestly, it still doesn't feel like enough considering all she did to her family for over 10 years, especially Mirabel.
The crack started with you. Bruno left because of you. Luisa's losing her powers. Isabella's out of control because of you. I don't know why you weren't given a gift, but it is not an excuse for you to hurt this family.
Even essentially low-key banishing / ignoring certain family members because they didn't get a gift or they got a gift that people didn't like. Now, did she need to be publicly flogged as a punishment? No, but I think more of the family members chewing her out would have helped with feeling like she experienced some just consequences. Like I mentioned, I think she nails everything in the criteria, but with a rushed ending, it makes it feel like she never got her consequences, which, if anything, I feel like is the most important one to nail down, at least in terms of the audience ever having hopes of both rooting for them to some degree or being able to forgive them, you know, as much as you can based on what they did. One more example of a character that I think is a poor example of a redeemed character, and to be fair, it could change for this character as the entire show isn't done at this time, so I'm going off of 2 seasons at this moment. But let's talk about Stolas from Hell of a Boss. This is a show that I've been watching pretty much since the beginning, around the time episode 2 or 3 came out for the first season. Despite watching the show, I didn't want to talk about the heavy decline in season 2 since so many people were already making videos on it, you know, because making a video about redeeming characters is so original, which you got me there. But season 2 has a lot of problems, with probably one of the biggest ones being what I can describe as the whoopification of Stolas, where any potential bad light from Stolas was removed in an attempt to remove any and all blame for him and his relationship with Blitz, or just any of the actions / problems that he is responsible for. If we were going off the 6 pieces, Stolas' attempted redemption of when he comes in to save Blitz, and no, yeah, spoilers for this show, but season 2 was such a soul-draining experience, I do not care, and if you clicked on the thumbnail, it's probably because you're already familiar with Hell of a Boss at this point, so if you want to play catch up, go watch Sarcastichorus. He's pretty much shares all the same thoughts on season 2 of Hell of a Boss as I do. Backstory: he grew up to be the heir of the Goetia, but as part of that he was put into an arranged marriage with a cartoonishly evil woman named Stella. And his dad didn't actually love him because the affinity to talk about fathers and trauma is something this video and any VisiPop project have in common. But he also gets involved in a business deal hookup situation with his childhood friend Blitz, in exchange for access to his grimoire. Action: coerced Blitz, who was in a much lower position of power, into having sex with him, and if you don't want to say coerce, well, I don't know how else to describe this.
I was thinking, what if we worked out some kind of exchange? Favors for favors. Doesn't that sound enticing? Once a month, on the full moon, you return the book to me, followed by a night of passionate fornication. And you get to keep it all the rest of the time, Sound fair, my little imp?
It's genuinely uncomfortable. He also constantly belittles Blitz, referring to him as his little impish plaything and other extremely degrading things. I saw someone make a comment on this, but imagine if you saw someone say to their significant other, "my little insert race here plaything," and it becomes pretty messed up. Also constantly neglecting his daughter because he's horny. Intention: he was horny and actually had a secret crush on Blitz since they were kids. Oh, but he's actually just really lonely and a sad boy, and his life is just absolutely terrible. Remorse / self-reflection. You see, he says he does, and the show tells me he does, but I don't buy it. Mostly because the show doesn't actually show it, and Stolas denies a lot of his past actions. He also continues to do the things he says he doesn't do, including looking down on Blitz and the way imps live despite them taking him in and helping him get back on his feet. And it's the same episode where all the fans squee when they dance at the end, but they also forget Stolas was an ungrateful during most of that episode.
Ugh, you have to spend your holiday at work? Money coming in? Oh, lords. I'm poor now.
he never takes accountability for his actions or the possible role he played in that messed up relationship. Facing the consequences. He experiences consequences, but not for his shitty actions, which isn't the same because if I have a character do something shitty, I want them to get grilled for that, not when they're actually trying to do something good. Because then it feels like the show isn't actually calling Stolas out on his bad behavior and his bad actions, and I don't really feel anything when he's trying to become a better person because I simply don't believe it. Fixing the mistakes. I mean, kind of, but not really. He's constantly is saying sorry and that he'll do better, but he doesn't really learn anything from it. Kind of reminds me of that one BoJack Horseman clip.
Todd, I'm sorry, all right? I screwed up. I know I screwed up. I don't know why.
Oh, great. Of course. Here it comes. You can't keep doing this. You can't keep doing shitty things and then feel bad about yourself like that makes it okay. You need to be better. You are all the things that are wrong with you. It's not the alcohol or the drugs or any of the shitty things that happened to you in your career or when you were a kid. It's you. All right? It's you.
Words only mean so much, but when action is actually being done, then I will actually believe this character is not only capable of being redeemed, but I will actually root for their redemption. Which makes me want to transition into the topic of the unforgivable actions, which it varies for everyone, but I feel like the general consensus is murder of innocent people, and possibly the biggest one, and I can't say it outright because then YouTube will nuke the hell out of this video, because trying to have conversations about uncomfortable topics isn't convenient for advertising, but acts involving SA. And so spoilers for the Invincible comic, and at this point I feel a lot of people are familiar with this scene, with many wondering how they will adapt it into the show. But I am of course referring to the scene where Anissa rapes Mark. And I shouldn't have to say this, but the fact that I legitimately see people on posts or videos covering this scene and are saying shit like, "He's lucky," or "Why is he being a baby?" are genuinely disgusting, and I hope that you either realize what you are saying is a horrible thing to say, or, and first off, now don't forget this step, it's very important, take a big step back. And the second part is, the really important part, so I can't understate the importance of this, but
and literally fuck your own face!
Despite Mark's reaction in the aftermath for him all being handled relatively well with it being taken seriously, Anissa does end up getting a redemption later in the comics with her realizing what she did was wrong, specifically and especially with Mark, and her sacrificing herself to save Adam Eve. But I'm sorry, I think even fictional characters have limits on if they can be forgiven or redeemed or not. There are some lines that you just can't walk back from. To choose, and the emphasis is on the word choose, to do something so evil and arguably one of the worst things you can ever do to a person is in my eyes not even capable of atoning for. And while I hope that most people watching this video will at the very least agree with me on that, it does bring up the question. So where do we draw the line for characters trying to redeem and atone for their past actions? And this might be an unsatisfying and a bit of a cop-out answer, but I don't think there's a set of rules. I think it's all based on personal beliefs. Yeah, I know, it kind of goes against the criteria I mentioned and everything, but I really do believe it's different for everyone. Even if the characters are well written, everyone kind of has their personal preferences and where they draw the line. For example, some people are willing to forgive Darth Vader or with him getting a positive end, but then they may also potentially draw the line at Omni-Man. Some people are willing to forgive Jinx, but they'll throw side eyes when Caitlyn went full dictator mode and gassed the entire Undercity and never felt like she got appropriate consequences for it. There are so many examples that could be used as good examples of redemptions, and just as many examples on how not to do a redemption. So with a couple of exceptions, I think ultimately it's gonna be up to the individual viewer and what they are or aren't okay with in terms of morals within media. Obviously, this is much different from real life, but that is just a big mess of discussions and debates that I am not nearly smart enough to talk about. I mean, I hope that I was able to talk about this topic in a tasteful manner. That was the goal going in, especially when talking about some more harsh topics, so if you don't think I did it tastefully, I apologize, that was never my intention, and feel free to go off and let me have it. And maybe you disagree with me, or maybe you agree with me. This is a topic I just find interesting and just wanted to bring this to the conversation. I'd love to hear your opinions on the matter, whether that be your characters that you see as redeemable, or, not redeemable. Thank you for watching this video and for everyone who has joined this channel over the course of 5 years. It's weird to think it's been that long with me starting off with Godzilla music videos and now talking about themes and ideas and movies and other silly nonsense. It's been an enjoyable and wild ride, so thank you. I also want to thank one of my friends, Nathan, who has been a longtime supporter of the channel and helped provide music for some of my videos. He recently released his first album titled I Live in Idaho and It Makes Me Sad. It's kind of that sad, emo, Midwestern music, so if that's your vibe, I highly recommend checking it out. So go show him some love and support over at any of the links down in the description. Anyways, my name's Cameron, spank all those buttons, stay safe out there. Thank you for the 5 years, and I will see you all later. Bye bye.